is going to be another type of theatrics where the Republican leadership, after being pushed by a national campaign across the country and pushed by Democrats in the House to have a genuine debate on Iraq where alternatives are considered and voted on, have decided to go through a theatrical quote-unquote debate in which the leadership, Republican leadership, are prohibiting any member of Congress from standing on the floor and offering any alternative to the Bush war in Iraq for an up or down vote. Absolutely prohibited, complete theatrics on the floor of the House tomorrow, just so we're sure that no reality creeps into the debate on Iraq, and no real challenge is allowed to surface in the halls of Congress in Washington. Back when we were on the edge of this mission accomplished era, back in 2002, for those of you who were here back then when we did this in June, remember that everybody was sort of strutting around. America had its mission accomplished. We were victorious in Iraq. Things were going extremely well. Remember, well, the fact of the matter is that we as progressives have had our difference tactically in what to do about Iraq and how we should move out of Iraq. But the fact is our analysis of the folly and the devastation of this attack on Iraq and the policy, this Bush doctrine that has been driving this attack has been disastrous, it's been immoral, and we as progressives have consistently been fighting and standing up to it, and that's what we have to do more than ever in 2006. We have a panel that is going to help us to do that today, to help us to understand both the picture of the reality in Iraq today, to understand the political context in which we as progressives are going to be working in 2006, to identify policy alternatives that we can go out and promote and advance in 2006. And then we're going to hear from a candidate, a very courageous candidate, who is laying it out all on the line and going out on the campaign trail to deliver that message in 2006. So it's a tremendous opportunity for all of us today. I've just been asked, before you introduce everybody, make sure you introduce yourself. My name is Tom Andrews, and I am the National Director of the Win Without War Coalition, a former member of Congress from Maine who served on the Armed Services Committee. And today we have 4 speakers who are going to truly make an enormous contribution to this session and to this conference. We're going to begin with someone who needs no introduction to anyone in this room, Ambassador Joe Wilson.
Lynn, I'm Ned Lamont.
Oh, hi.
Nice to see you.
Wow. Joe, you got a standing ovation before I said anything nice about you. Called by President George Herbert Walker Bush a, quote, true American hero, Ambassador Joe Wilson has been involved in international politics for more than 20 years. As acting U.S. ambassador to Iraq during the first Gulf War, he was responsible for freeing 150 American hostages seized by Iraq. In the months leading up to the current invasion, the CIA sent Joe to investigate whether Saddam Hussein tried to buy uranium from Niger, a claim that Joe happened to find very unlikely, and which he happened to have the temerity to say in a now famous op-ed to the New York Times. In retaliation, and to discourage others from speaking out, White House officials identified Joe's wife, Valerie Plame, as a clandestine CIA operative. Joe has recently published his memoirs, The Politics of Truth, Inside the Lies That Led to War and Betrayal, and Betrayed My Wife's CIA Identity. Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Joe Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please. Brings tears to my eyes. Thank you all very much. I used to be, as I said in Las Vegas last week, the last American diplomat to have met with Saddam Hussein before the first Gulf War. Now, of course, I'm Mr. Valerie Plame, the husband of the first American spy ever to have her identity compromised by her own government. I used to be a George Herbert Walker Bush, also known as Bush 41, ambassador. Now I am a discredited Democratic partisan hack, if you believe some of what you read. Those, of course, who continue to write that in the face of the facts as they have emerged are either dupes of the ongoing disinformation campaign or willful perpetrators of it. Now, I want to talk about Iraq today, not because it brings me any joy to do so, but it is a respite from talking about the leak investigation. And I bring to this debate 2.5 years' experience in Baghdad during the first Gulf War, having dealt with those sons of bitches, and yes, you can put that on tape. On behalf of my fellow American citizens, 2,000 of whom were driven into hiding in Kuwait, 150 of whom were taken hostage by Saddam Hussein, and another 75 to whom we offered safe quarters so they wouldn't be taken hostage by Saddam Hussein. It's important to understand that in the run-up to the war, we let ourselves down, all of us. Those of us who were in the debate didn't win the debate. And there's some very good reasons why we didn't win the debate. First, in the aftermath of 9/11, there was a general suspension of skepticism and a putting of trust in your government. Second, in the use of force authorization debate, it was made very clear by the timing of the debate that if you didn't vote with the president, he was going to beat you like a drum in the campaign at a time when America was scared and when America was duped by this administration, and gets me to my third point, which is this administration carried on a campaign based on lies and disinformation in order to persuade the American public that the threat posed by Saddam Hussein was so grave that military action involving the invasion, conquest, and occupation of Iraq and the regime change was the only way that we could deal with it. Those were the arguments that we fought against. We lost those arguments. The Democratic Party and a lot of us in this room were conflicted. In large measure, we were conflicted because Saddam Hussein was a great villain. If you go back and you look at our human rights reports during the 3 years that I was there, you will see that we cataloged the political deaths of his opponents and the sending of bills for the bullets used to members of their families, the opponents' families. This was not a nice man. We believe in the Democratic Party and the progressive movement in human rights. Indeed, human rights has been part of the values that we in the State Department promoted since the arrival of Jimmy Carter and Walter Mondale in 1976. I take great pride in having served my country during the intervening 25 years and having been promoting and defending those values that we hold dear and those values that used to make America the city on the hill for a good part of the world. However conflicted we may have been in the run-up to the war, however, make no mistake about it. If you still support the policies of this president and this administration, you don't deserve the vote of Democrats, independents, or, shall I say, even Republicans. As simple as that. Now, the consequences of this war ought to be apparent to everybody. 2,500 dead. Over 18,000 Americans wounded in action, a good many of them so grievously that they will not be able to return to a normal life. Tens of thousands of Iraqis who have been killed, injured, and internally displaced as a consequence of the war we brought them on the heels of shock and awe. The pillaging of our treasury to the tune of several $billions a month. The collapse of American leadership in the world, a world that desperately needs leadership. You need only to look at what other countries are doing today. Their policies are predicated upon a need to contain a perceived need to contain the aggression of the United States. Policies that they are putting in place today will long outlast the demise of this administration, and it will be an uphill battle to regain our place as a leader in this world. The only good news is, in the absence of American leadership, there is an absence of leadership. The sooner we can get back to playing that role of leader, the easier it will be for us, and the sooner we can get back to promoting those values and those policies that we hold dear and which are enshrined in the UN Human Rights Charter. Let me talk briefly about what I see as the way ahead. Now, I understand that there has been a lot of talk about withdrawal, strategic redeployment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I heard that there was some dispute and debate yesterday, some discussion after Senator Clinton spoke. But let me just say this, and listen to me as I work my way through this argument. In my judgment, talk of a strategic withdrawal is the wrong discussion to have at this time, and I will tell you why. One, we're in there. People are dying. But two, most importantly, this is a straw man for the Republican Party. They are going to withdraw anyway. What they want to do with this debate, by sucking us into this debate, is ensure that for the next 40 years, just like for the past 35 years, we, the Democrats, will be accused of cutting and running. We don't want to give them the moral high ground on that. In my judgment, the argument to make is the same argument we make every time we build a military force to take a military action. It needs to be task-based. What we should be demanding of this administration and what we should be proposing to this administration are the tasks that we believe the military should be attempting to accomplish or should eschew at this phase of the occupation. And let me just give you two things that I don't believe the administration or our military force, more appropriately, should be doing at this stage, particularly in the aftermath of Don Rumsfeld saying there were 265,000 Iraqi troops stood up. One, there is no longer any requirement, in my judgment, to put Americans in harm's way unnecessarily. And two, there should be no longer any requirement for Americans to be killing Arabs unnecessarily. And when you get Americans out of the way of harm, and when you get Americans out of the business of killing Arabs, then perhaps we can focus on what we ought to do best with whatever we may have left in terms of vestiges of leadership, and that is to try and facilitate a process that leads to a political solution. There is no military victory to be gained. There is no longer any need for Americans to be fighting in somebody else's civil war. There may well be a requirement, which I happen to believe there is, for America to use its good offices and its leadership to put into place a process that will bring together not just the insurgency groups within Iraq, but also their foreign patrons. A concert of nations bringing to the table not just the insurgents within Iraq, but the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Iranians. Yes, we need to speak to the Iranians about this. The Turks, probably some leading powers from Europe, and the Russians, all of whom have interests at stake. I would hope that American leadership could still have the credibility to facilitate that. It is unclear because it hasn't been tested by an administration that continues to believe that killing Americans and killing Arabs in Iraq is the only formula for success. I say, put Condoleezza Rice to work. Get her out of Jakarta and out of Bulgaria and into Cairo, Amman, Ankara, and the other places in the region to put together a process that will allow the insurgents and their patrons to come to the table and formulate for themselves a solution. When we offer solutions, we don't do our best work. What we need to do is to offer the parties to this conflict a process whereby they can come to a political solution themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. And again, we're going to be having people distributing cards for questions. If just raise your hand with your card, and we'll pick it up, and we'll ask the questions at the end of the session. Our next speaker also needs no introduction. She has been a champion for progressive values and issues from the moment she took office representing California's 6th Congressional District. Representative Lynn Woolsey, who, by the way, is also working today on this up on the hill somewhere, and will have to be casting votes, so will have to be leaving us after she speaks, is the co-chairperson of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and one of the leading opponents to the Iraq War. She's a champion for us. She's a champion for America. It's great, Lynn, to have you here. Representative Lynn Woolsey.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for Win Without War. I served with Tom, but only for a very short time, and I learned from him from the minute I was elected. So it's wonderful to be here with you today. And this entire panel, thank you very much. I'm honored to be part of it. And I'm honored to be with progressives this morning. You know, in my district, if anybody wants to run against me, they immediately, when they do run against me, I just had a primary, they immediately say she's too liberal for her district. They use the liberal L word. Or if they really want to get nasty, they say, well, she's a socialist. You got to know that when they start running against me. So I say in return, well, if being against the war from the very beginning, if working for the people of the 6th Congressional District in California and meeting their needs makes me too liberal or a socialist, so be it. As co-chair of the Progressive Caucus with Barbara Lee from the other side of the bay from me in California, and under the leadership of Bill Gould, who I'm sure you all know, I am committed to working with you to take back America. It's an honor to speak to the activists who have opposed the Bush-Iraq policy on this Iraq war since day one, who are responsible for the way the American people have turned against the war now. Because back in 2003, in the days of Freedom Fries and Dixie Chick boycotts, a lot of people who knew this war was wrong sat on their hands and muzzled themselves because they were afraid of the smears and lies of the right-wing media machine, because they were afraid of being tagged as terrorist sympathizers. But not you, not me, not us. We stayed and we fought. We said no from the very beginning because we opposed the war and because we love America. We oppose this war because we have nothing but the highest respect for the men and women who wear the uniform. We oppose this war because preemptive invasions of sovereign states that pose no threat to our national security are not what America stands for. We had the courage to stand in the face of presidential approval ratings in the 80s, and we were able to say, and weren't afraid to say, no, this is wrong. So with the help and support of progressives like you, I took up this cause when it seemed hopeless. I was the first in the Congress to introduce a resolution calling for an end to the war. I forced the first floor debate and vote on bringing our troops home just about a year ago, May 25th, actually. When the congressional majority abandoned its oversight responsibilities and refused to hold hearings about Iraq exit strategies, I convened forums for a frank discussion about how to bring our troops home. The first was in a little tiny room. The second one, they actually gave us a hearing room because there was some respect growing in the House of Representatives. Well, a funny thing happens when you lead. People follow. Thanks to our passion for peace, thanks to our refusal to jump on the speeding pro-war bandwagon, Americans began to ask questions and rethink the Bush-Iraq policy. The American public concluded that whatever this war is about, it isn't worth 2,500 American lives, more than $250 billion, and all of the global goodwill, credibility, and moral authority we have spent. Ours is the mainstream position, while the President has lost the American people. We are not only on the right side of history, we are on the right side of public opinion as well. I generally look forward rather than backward, but it's worth remembering how we got into this mess. My friends never forget that we were right. Joe Wilson was right. There were no weapons of mass destruction. Today, the White House admits that weapons of mass destruction skeptics, like all of us in this room, were right, even though they questioned our patriotism at the time. Oops, they're saying now. The intelligence was wrong. But they insist that it was flawed rather than manipulated. Their best defense being, very pathetically, we were fools. We weren't liars. How awful. It's the leadership of this country. If U.S. intelligence agencies got it wrong in the most monumental question that we faced in decades, am I the only one who thinks some sort of apology is in order? Or at the very least, the prompt return of George Tenet's Presidential Medal of Freedom? But the questions we should be asking now is what to do. The President and the Congress are absolutely no help here. The White House gives us a new version of stay the course every week, while the House of Representatives tomorrow actually, will be debating a pointless resolution that is long on rhetoric and short on solutions. Meanwhile, I've offered proposals that not only deal with the Iraq question, but also offer an entirely new and overhauled national security paradigm. First, to keep Iraq as secure and stable as possible, we must encourage the establishment of a multinational interim security force under the auspices of the UN and NATO. We must pursue a diplomatic offensive, recasting the U.S. role in Iraq as reconstruction partner rather than military occupier. We must help Iraq rebuild its economic infrastructure and nurture the development of a civil society. And we must renounce any designs on control of Iraq oil and any plans of permanent military bases. We must also establish an international peace commission consisting of global experts in conflict resolution, which would oversee post-war reconciliation and coordinate peace talks between Iraq's various factions. And most importantly, in the name of moral decency, fiscal sanity, and national security, we must bring our troops home. But ending the occupation of Iraq should be the beginning of a completely new way of thinking about how to keep America safe. For too long, we've equated national security with war and conquest. It's time we use less brawn and more brains to protect our people and our interests. We have to get over the might is right attitude toward global conflict. Iraq is Exhibit A in the case that so-called hawkishness does not necessarily make America safer. With the help of groups like Physicians for I'm trying to go fast because I might go a little bit beyond my 10
Keep going,
minutes.
Lynn.
With the help of groups like Physicians for Social Responsibility, Women's Action for New Directions, and the Friends Committee on National Legislation, I've developed a strategy called SMART Security. SMART stands for Sensible, Multilateral American Response to Terrorism. At the core of SMART is a belief that war should be the very last resort, that peace and diplomacy, not belligerence and chest beating, must be the guiding light of our foreign policy. SMART, on the other hand, is deadly serious about stopping acts of terrorism, not by arbitrarily invading sovereign nations, but by strengthening our multilateral relationships, by improving our intelligence capabilities, and by enhancing efforts to cut off financing for terrorist organizations. SMART focuses on stopping the spread of weapons of mass destruction, not by deposing regimes that don't have them, but with diplomacy, vigorous inspection regimes, and regional security arrangements. SMART calls for renewed commitment to the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, which has been successful in securing loose nuclear materials in the former USSR. SMART also calls on the United States to set an example for the world by living up to our commitment to draw down our nuclear arsenal. What moral authority do we have to pressure Iran about its nuclear program when our government consistently undermines the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty? Ignoring our multilateral obligations in this area. Being smart about national security also means dramatically rearranging our budget priorities. It makes no sense at all that we continue to invest billions of dollars in a missile defense shield. The Cold War has been over for 15 years. It's time for our defense spending to reflect current events. SMART involves a huge shift in resources away from weapons systems that have outlived their usefulness and towards strategies that address the new threats of a new era. We all know, for example, that our continued dependence on foreign imported oil, especially from the volatile Middle East, compromises our very national security. So SMART includes investments in clean, renewable, domestic energy sources that will help us kick our oil habit. Any smart approach to national security must address certain root causes of terrorism, like instability, despair, and hopelessness. So the proposal includes an ambitious international development program for impoverished nations, debt relief, democracy building, schooling for women and girls, human rights education, environmental programs, infrastructure development, and much, much more. Think about this. With the money spent on the invasion and occupation of Iraq, the National Priorities Project calculates that we could have fully funded global anti-hunger efforts for more than a decade, or provide basic immunizations to children around the world for 96 years. Both would have remarkable achievements, but instead we've lit a match that has ignited a civil war in Iraq. Actually, I believe in what the President calls the transformational powers of freedom. But smart security achieves that goal without making violence the paramount American value, without flattening an entire nation and killing thousands of its innocent people. Smart security is tough but diplomatic, vigilant but peaceful, pragmatic but idealistic. So finally, and in conclusion, it's about time we started protecting America by relying on the very best of America. Our love of freedom, our desire for peace, our capacity for global leadership, and our compassion for the people of the world. I thank you very much for having me.
Lynn Woolsey, everybody. Now we're going to talk about the political climate in which we have to deliver this message, particularly in those red states, those areas that we have to be competitive. And to do that, to take us through that, I'd like to introduce Tom Matzzie, who is the Washington director for MoveOn.org, who I'm proud to say is a member of the Win Without War Coalition. Prior to joining MoveOn, Tom served as director of online organizing for the Kerry Edwards campaign, managing and organizing the campaign's 2.8 million person email list. And from 2000 to 2004, he was online mobilization director at the AFL-CIO, Building the Union's Movement Internet program. And from 1998 to 2000, he organized the coalition opposing Social Security privatization at the Campaign for America's Future, a very successful campaign. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Matzzie.
Thank you. Excuse my, I get the computer set up here. I'm going to do a little bit of slideshow, but first I just want to say a couple things. I wanted to first recognize a couple of other MoveOn staff members who are here in the room, and they don't know I'm going to do this. So first I want to recognize Carrie Olson in the back, who's got her hand up right there. Carrie is, don't hold your applause. Keep applauding. Chief Operating Officer for MoveOn, and she lives in Berkeley, California. Next, I want to recognize Ben Branzell, who many of you get emails from. There's Ben. Ben is MoveOn's advocacy director and lives here in Washington, among other places, I would say. And finally, Natalie Foster, who's new to MoveOn, deputy field director, lives in Atlanta, Georgia. MoveOn staff are embedded across America, as we like to say. Second, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize two things. First, I want to make an announcement to support of our movement allies that today at 3 p.m. there will be a march that starts here from the Hilton to the White House. Right, Ann? You're sending a message about the 2,500 who are unfortunately soon to be killed in Iraq. And that is the second thing, which I hope everyone understands, that we are this week likely to hit 2,500 American soldiers killed in Iraq. And so that's a very solemn moment that we should make sure we never forget the sacrifices of those who have left us in Iraq. I'm here not to inspire you. I'm here to equip you. I want to provide you something that you can use when you go back home. And what I want to provide you is a paradigm-shifting view of what's going on in the country. I often, in my work leading MoveOn's Iraq campaign, hear from conservative members of Congress who say, oh yeah, that's fine, you represent a bunch of liberals, but you don't represent the people in my district. Well, that's actually first of all, we do represent probably hundreds of thousands of MoveOn members in their districts and states. Second, it's actually a question that we can investigate and and look at. How do people in these quote-unquote swing districts feel about the war in Iraq? And so we hired, as the coin of the realm in Washington, D.C., we hired a pollster. And we asked this pollster to look at how to make Iraq matter in the 2006 election. And I want you to understand, this is paradigm-shifting stuff. The pollster, and you won't be able to see all these slides depending on where you're at in the room, so I will make sure that I describe them so for those of you that can't see them. But the first thing we just want to outline, we looked at it, we did a survey, the top 68 swing districts. 2/3 of these districts are held by Republicans, very conservative places. And the first question was, what is the political environment in these places? And 65% of the people in these districts think we're on the wrong track, which is not that different from the rest of the country, maybe actually a little more pessimistic. A majority disapproves of Bush's job as president. It says in this survey, 43%. That gives you an idea how much more conservative it is, because as we know nationally, the president, his approval ratings are in the mid-30s or lower. Democrats are in a strong position. This is good news. In the generic ballot, who would you vote for, the Democrat or the Republican? Democrats in these swing districts where the elections are going to be closest in the fall are leading 50-42. This is before we asked voters, what if you heard about this issue, or what if you heard about that issue? How would you feel? Iraq is a really important part of why Democrats are in this strong position. This is the top issues for voters. We asked you, thinking about the elections for Congress this year, which one of the following issue areas would be most important to you in deciding how to vote for a candidate in Congress? And by far, the number one issue is the war in Iraq. Jobs and the economy follows. If you see corruption in Washington, a very important issue that Move On works on, is number 18, which is about half of the rate, has 18%, which is about half of the rate that the war in Iraq does. And that's the issue that Democrats in Congress are hanging their entire electoral strategy on. The sixth most important issue to voters in these swing districts. Now, I would say corruption is also a tool. You can use it to tell a story about Iraq, or jobs in the economy, or terrorism, or health care, or taxes. And that's what we do. We use the story of members of Congress who are caught red-handed taking money from defense contractors in Iraq, at the same time that troops don't have body armor. Right? That's a story that we use, a corruption story. Iraq is the top issue for voters looking for change. So if you are one of those people that says, I want to change in direction, it is by far the biggest issue, again, increasing. And now if we look at Democrats, right, who it's a midterm election, they say turnout by the base, right, by Democrats will be really important. It is the only issue, essentially, with half of Democrats saying it is their top issue and deciding and thinking about how they're going to vote for Congress. So let's just pause for a second and imagine you're Karl Rove. Now, I know, Joe, you would have you'd take this in a different direction than I might if you were imagining you were Karl Rove. And you got a poll that said the top issue for half of the people you need to turn out to vote is taxes. Do you think you would, A, not talk about taxes at all, B, make taxes a really important part of your campaign, or C, I don't think there is a C, right? There's no C. So between those two options, if you were Karl Rove, what would you do? A, which would I say? B. Oh, okay. So Democrats are going for A, right? Right now, unfortunately, in too many campaigns. Now, we do have one Democrat on the stage with us, Ned Lamont, who is speaking to voters about this issue. I want to also talk about the Democratic base a little bit. All right, for all voters, this is Democrats and Republicans, 34% say it's their top issue. Among Democrats, half of them say it. Among African Americans, 51% say it's their top issue. Liberals, 45%. Union members, 34%. Unmarried women, a very important voting bloc for Democrats. They win, 70% of that bloc. 34%. Hispanics, Latinos, 35%. It's the top issue for essentially every group of Democratic base voters. Now here's another survey. It's moving clearly towards the Democrats. 49% say they are more likely to vote for the Democrat, and because of Iraq, and 50% say less likely to vote for the Republican. That's a shift. I mean, that's hard to. It adds up to a big shift towards the Democrat. Now here's an important. This is the most important slide in the entire presentation. All right. The first chart is where we are before we talk about Iraq in the poll. 50-42. I showed you that number earlier. You remember that? The second one is after we bring Iraq up and talk about Iraq in the election debate. So you start out at +8 for the Democrat, 50-42, and you end up at 54-41, +13. Now let's understand this, because this is paradigm shifting. Most of the political consultants and the chattering class here in Washington, they are afraid to talk about Iraq to elect Democratic candidates. Right? Here is proof from the most competitive swing districts in the country that a candidate who talks about Iraq, and you'll see they can do it in different ways, but a candidate who talks about Iraq does better than a candidate who ignores it. Right? The Democrats are winning if Iraq is part of the election debate. Now, here's the other thing. Clarity on Iraq strengthens the position of the candidate. This is similar to the last slide you saw, but it's a little different. All right? Again, we start on the far left at +8, right, before we talk about Iraq. Now, then we tested two different ways you could talk about Iraq. And this is just at the beginning of the survey. So it changes, actually, once we get farther into it. If you say, bring troops home within a year, you move to 52-40, +12, 4-point swing. If you say just new direction in Iraq, right, which is, we've heard that before, right? Who says that? Hillary Clinton. You move from +8 to +9, right? So the new direction in Iraq, people are like, what the heck does that mean? I want someone who's going to tell me what they're going to do in Iraq. I mean, I think even just what Joe Wilson said, that sort of detail, people would be like, yeah, okay, maybe we can work with that. But clarity is really important. And here's what's really important. Women's support particularly increased if you are the candidate taking the clear position on Iraq. That's the gender gap right there on the left that we start with, 52-38, up 14, right? That's great news for Democrats if they have a +14 gender gap. If you talk about Iraq, you move to 58-31, +27. That is a huge increase in the women vote, if we bring in Iraq to the debate. That's really important to understand. This is, again, think of this as paradigm shifting stuff. We can put the Iraq issue in front of voters and win. Clarity. This is a much harder slide to read because it's much smaller type from even here. Someone who takes a clear position on Iraq is conceived with troop reductions. People think they're more likely to care about people. They're less of a typical politician. They're stronger, and they're also the Republicans think you're a little weaker and you're a little less trustworthy. But that's the Republicans. But you really pick up in sort of Democratic deficits. Are you strong or weak? People think you're strong if you're like Jack Murtha and you're just up there telling the truth about what we should do. Now, it's not all good news, right? I don't want to just say this is a simple issue, just get up there, and say it how it is. People are very deeply conflicted about Iraq. I suspect many of us are conflicted about Iraq. We know it's a mess. We know it's going to be, bad if we get out. So here's some more information. Over half of our people in the survey said Iraq was not worth the costs. Respondents say the nation is less secure since invading Iraq. Disapproval of Bush's handling of the war is even higher, right? 58-40. And there's a big support for new direction. The top reasons people are pissed about the war in Iraq: one, that we were misled; second, the spending, the cost of the war, both, in terms of dollars and human costs. But I want to make here's an important slide because this makes an important point. While I said people want support a candidate who wants us to get out of Iraq, they don't always support the position of getting out of Iraq. This shows that they have powerful arguments. The Republican argument that we have to stay until Iraq is stable beats actually the kind of the get out position. The U.S. should bring home all U.S. troops within a year to force Iraqis to take control of their country. Now, that's just one way we framed it. There's different ways to frame it. Another thing is that instability and violence is viewed by many people as a reason to stay, not to leave. This was surprising. I was blown away by this. But it's important to know these things because we should be out there saying the things we know that will help advance our arguments. The country in these places is divided over the debate over withdrawal. It's not always clear. And so it's really important that we get the best frame for the Iraq debate. In revote after we also tested whether or not you support getting out of Iraq or staying within a year. Again, these are very conservative places in the country, so don't take this as gospel about where America is. We started out initially, saying, do you support getting out of Iraq within a year, which is a moderate position, out within a year. We started at plus 19, 57% favored it, 38% opposed it. And then we ended, after talking about Iraq so much, with losing support for getting out within a year. All right? So here's the situation we're in. Our candidates do better when we force Iraq into the election debate. The country becomes a little more nervous about getting out of Iraq when it's talked about so much. Right? Now, we come to the conclusion that this means we have to be talking about Iraq. Why? Because without a change in political leadership, right, we're not going to be able to get out of Iraq. And we'll take a temporary hit in public opinion in some places if we can, in exchange, get the change in leadership we need, to get us out of Iraq. And so I think that's the most important thing. There are a lot of different parts to the survey, but we can talk about that some more. One final point I want to make is what's Move On's Iraq campaign in 2006. Our goal will be to force the Iraq debate into key congressional elections around the country. Right now, we are on the air in 4 congressional districts with an advertisement that says, this member of Congress caught red-handed taking X thousands of dollars from Halliburton while troops in Iraq didn't have body armor. Very powerful ad. And that'll be a key part of it. The second thing is we're going to be supporting and fundraising for Iraq champions, candidates who are breathing fire on Iraq and are doing a really good job of it. That someone like Ned Lamont, but also some of these Iraq vets who are running for office around the country. But that's a key part of our strategy for Iraq in 2006. So the final note I want to say is, I think the foreign policies articulated by Joe Wilson and Lynn Woolsey are really important for us to understand. We are a great and magnificent country, and we should be dedicating ourselves to great and magnificent causes. And the war in Iraq is not one of those, right? Ending poverty, ending disease, those are great causes. And we have to reinvest in some of that leadership that we had in that respect that we had for the last 50 years. And that's the sort of path that will get us, make us more secure. And to do that, it's going to take a change in political leadership, which means all of us have to work harder and win these elections this November. So thank you.
All right, my job is to talk a little bit about how the war in Iraq plays out on the campaign trail in Connecticut. I'll try and put some stories on what Tom was saying. I know that on paper this is a Democratic primary, but between you and me, our race has a lot of characteristics of a Democratic challenger to a Republican incumbent. So I think you can take some messages from this. All right, so it was just a few months ago that we got together at the old State House in Hartford, and I threw my hat into the ring. I said, I think it's important that I get into this race. I think we ought to start investing in great schools again for our kids. We've got to invest in universal health care for each and every American. We got to invest in clean energy. I think we got to talk about Sam Alito. I think we got to talk about the Terry Schiavo case. And I think we got to talk about the war as an example of how our country has gone badly awry. The next day, the headline in the paper was, anti-war candidate challenges Lieberman. So let's face it, it's the big elephant in the room. And Senator Lieberman, in turn, challenged me and said, Ned Lamont is an angry, single-issue candidate. Well, the angry part didn't stick too well, but I'd like to say a little bit about the single-issue part. I mean, as Senator Lieberman is going around the state a little bit, he's been saying, look, I'm wrong on the war, but I'm right on Anwar. I'm batting 500. You know, give me another term. So for me, it's important as we talk about the war, what it means. I'm reminded of, you remember Ed Koch, Mayor? I mean, he took this he had a better response, I thought, many years ago, where he was challenged by somebody on an issue, and he finally said, all right, if you agree with, I don't agree, but if you agree with me more than you agree with the other guy, give me your vote. But if you agree with me 100% of the time, go see a psychiatrist. So that was how Ed Koch put it. But as I talk about the war, it's important to realize how big an issue it is and how it plays to different people in different ways. You know, as I go around the state of Connecticut, and I've had to introduce myself, nobody ever says, here's a man who needs no introduction when I go around. I've been introducing myself fast and furious. You know, first of all, you go to the college campuses, and it's great. I mean, the students are so energized, and they look at this war as saying something about the moral authority of our country. They talk about it in terms of Hadifa and Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo, and we're a much stronger country when we're true to our values. When we compromise our values, we weaken our country, and that hurts us around the world and hurts us in the war on terror. And they're so passionate and strong. But then there's some that say, oh, you know, Lamont's got a lot of students and a lot of bloggers, but where's the mainstream? But go out in the Memorial Day parades as you go around the state of Connecticut and your towns. You know, go to Naugatuck Valley, go to Niantic. It's veterans. It's veterans who are standing up, and they're reaching out, and they're saying, our troops, whether I was for or against the war, our troops have done everything we could ever ask of them. It's time to bring them home to a hero's welcome. Then you keep going around the state. You go talk to the workers at the Sikorsky plant who are on strike due to health care and being forced to pay more and more for their health care costs. You go to the high school in Bridgeport, Connecticut, an inner city high school where I teach some classes. And there's folks, they ask the same question that I hear all over the state, which is, how come we can afford to spend $250 million a day in Iraq, and we can't afford universal health care for each and every American? Harding High School closes down. Harding High School closes down at 3 in the afternoon. We're cutting back on sports, arts, drama, and all the things we need to do to give our kids a running head start in the 21st century. You know, you go around the state of Connecticut, go down to Fairfield County where you have more of the financial swells hang out. You know, they say, look, if this war was so important, how come we're not paying for it? How come we're giving tax cuts to the rich and we're borrowing money from the Chinese and the Japanese? Does that make our country any stronger? You know, one thing I don't hear as much, you know, Ambassador, as I go around, is the strategic implications of this war. And whether it did make our country any more secure, whether it made Israel more secure, whether it made the Middle East more stable, what it's done in terms of Afghanistan, what it's done in terms of Osama bin Laden. But I think that's not because people care, but at least in our state and in our primary, everybody has made up their mind. It was a mistake, and what do we do next? And let me just say that that's how now that's how the Lieberman and the establishment media is framing it a little bit. Now they come to me and they say, all right, Ned, that's then and now's now. What do you do going forward? And my response on this, and I think it's important, is look, don't write off the history. First of all, there are no good choices. There are no good choices because George Bush and Don Rumsfeld, and Dick Cheney, and Joe Lieberman rushed us into this war, got our 132,000 troops stuck in the middle of a bloody civil war, and they should be held accountable. I think the guys that got us into this war are the ones least likely to figure out a common sense way to get us out. I think Donald Rumsfeld ought to graciously step aside. Joe Lieberman disagrees, and that's why we're having a debate. And when it comes to these medals, like the medal for George Tenet, Ambassador, I don't know, what do you think about Karl Rove's security clearance? Maybe that's something we ought to reconsider as well. Look, I was so proud of Jack Murtha when he stood up. I was proud because here was somebody who was previously pro-war, who's one of the best friends the military has on Capitol Hill, a decorated veteran, and somebody who finally stood up and said with clarity that stay the course is not a winning strategy. We've got to change course, and the best hope for stability, Tom, the best hope that we can turn things around, the best hope we have to give these Iraqis a decent interval so they can reach a political solution for this is to get our troops out of harm's way and let the Iraqis find a political solution. I'll just say one other thing about Congressman Murtha, Ambassador Wilson, and those who have stood up, tall. I think it's high time the Democrats stand up and stop mumbling. Say loud and clear what we mean and what we stand for. I'd like to introduce my beautiful wife, Annie, who's here. But if Annie Lamont came to me at the beginning of this year and said, Ned, 2006 is going to be a year of significant transition, what the hell does that mean? I think we're much stronger when we say what we mean and do what we say. We be loud and clear about what we're going to stand for. I think that's when Democrats start winning, and that's how I think America starts winning again. That's why I'm in this race. I'm Ned Lamont, and I approve this message. Thank you.
Wow! All right, get those checkbooks ready. Before we, and if we could get the final questions that have been submitted up here, and if you have an additional question, please raise your hand and either get a card or submit a card. Before we go to our Q&A, we've asked Paul Rykoff to be the first to respond to the presentations this morning. Paul is the executive director and the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. He enlisted in the U.S. Army. In 1998, he served a tour of duty in Iraq, lasting from April of 2003 to February of 2004. And during that time, Paul was a first lieutenant and served as an infantry platoon leader in the 3rd Infantry and 1st Armored Divisions. Paul Rykoff.
Thank you. I'll be pretty brief. I'm joined also by a few other members of IAVA, Richard Murphy and Patrick Campbell. And we're here for 2 reasons. We're here as a resource. We're a nonpartisan group. I'm a political independent, and we go to every conference we can. Because what I notice is that there are a lot of panels on Iraq, no offense to these guys, that don't involve anyone who's been there, that don't have anyone who's been there. Mr. Wilson, I know, has been there. Other members of the panel may have been there as well, but there's a real void in the dialogue in this country. People who fought on the ground are not involved. And I'm encouraged by the fact that 6 Iraq vets are running this fall, because I think what they're going to present the American people with is a very important element, a messenger. And what I'm looking for is a message. And in the same way President Bush has failed to articulate a proper policy on what to do in Iraq, I think there's a lot of political rhetoric that fails to articulate how we're going to get out of Iraq. And stay the course, in my opinion, is not a military or political strategy, but neither is bring them home now. And what I urge all of you to do is articulate a message that rings with us as veterans and rings with the American people, because I know you all are convinced by a lot of what you're hearing here and you're behind it, and I feel the energy, and I am too. But the real question is, what the hell do we do now? That is the question. We know Iraq is screwed up. I knew Iraq was screwed up when I got to Baghdad 3 days after the mission accomplished speech. I knew it at that moment. And those of us who've been on the ground know it. But the big question for America is, what do we do now? And I urge all of you to try to find those messengers and try to find that message. I think Iraq veterans can be a critical part of that. We also want to hear about how people are going to stand behind veterans. There are plenty of people in Congress who voted for this war and against VA funding. For this war, and against TRICARE, medical care for our troops in harm's way. And I'll refrain from my military language. I mean, as an infantry soldier, our favorite weapon is often the F-bomb. And I know there are cameras here, so I'll try to restrain myself. But we're looking for new answers, and we're looking for new leadership. And I think you should look at the Iraq vets much like you look at the American people. We're up for grabs. The way most of us look at it, the Republicans have gotten us into this mess, but the Democrats don't seem to have a plan to get us out. So whoever articulates it first is going to get us, and you're going to get the American people as well. I think we're all looking for that now, and I'm really encouraged by the dialogue here today. And I think, you know, Ambassador Wilson is somebody that we all look to as veterans for inspiration, and his courage has been a real inspiration to all of us. But there are Iraq vets who are stepping forward, who don't always necessarily advocate for an immediate and total withdrawal, but they speak from a position of credibility, which is seriously lacking in this dialogue. And I encourage you to listen to them, and don't cut off your nose to spite your face. There are plenty of people who can be effective on challenging the Bush administration who speak from a position of having been on the ground. So there are people like Tammy Duckworth, who's running for Congress in the Chicago area. The woman lost 2 legs in a helicopter crash. She was shot down in Iraq, and now she's running for Congress. I don't care what party Tammy's running from. If she was running as a communist, I'd vote for her. I mean, she's an incredibly inspirational person. She's been on the ground. She's been in Walter Reed. She understands this war. And instead of telling her what to say, we should be listening to what she has to say. So I'm going to wrap up, but I just want to encourage you all to seek out the veterans, because neither party has really made a concerted effort to seek out the veterans. Over 1 million of them have gone through theater so far. Over 18,000 are wounded. 1 in 4 roughly are going to come home with post-traumatic stress disorder, but they're entering the political dialogue. They're running for office. They're writing. They're becoming leaders, and they need your support, and they need your help. And they can help you be a part of guiding us through what I think is the most difficult time in our modern history here. Iraq is the #1 issue for this fall. I think it's going to be, unfortunately, the #1 issue in 2008 as well. So as we start to move forward, we've got to evolve beyond the false choice and start to come up with real solutions. And I think whoever can articulate that, come up with the messenger and come up with the message, is really going to win the Iraq veterans community, and they're also going to win the American people. So we're very grateful to be here. We're going to be at a booth afterward. We'll be around. And we again, offer ourselves up as a resource. We're here to help you understand the war in Iraq and help share our experiences. And again, offer what we think is unique in this debate, a position of credibility. We've been there, and we can help you understand it. So thank you very much for having us here. We'll be here.
Thank you, Paul. Joe?
Are these on? Can we check these on?
Can we have an audio person turn on?
Hello?
Well, let me.
Yeah, this one works.
Okay. Well, let me just say, if I may, if you haven't seen the war tapes, see it. It is an extraordinarily powerful, powerful film put together by people who have been there. And it reinforces something that I believe for a long time, and that is the most solemn decision a government ever makes is that decision to send our sons and daughters off to die and to kill in the name of us, the governed. And it's damn important we get it right, because the consequences are very, very real. Tammy Duckworth is an example both of the consequences and of the hope. I've been out there in Chicago with her. She is a wonderful, wonderful candidate. These gentlemen are wonderful. The tape is wonderful. And go do yourself a favor and see it. The War Tapes. It's the name of the movie.
The War Tapes. You know, we mentioned at the outset, and Lynn had to go off to to vote, but the House, after a national campaign to force, can you imagine this, to force the United States Congress to do its job and actually have a debate for the first time since the invasion on Iraq and what to do about Iraq. They're finally having a debate on Thursday, and the debate is called declaring on a resolution, declaring that the United States will prevail in the global war on terror. Okay? Now, since the administration invaded Iraq, terrorist attacks have increased by 5,000%. Those who have been killed by terrorist attacks have increased by 2,000%, as the number of terrorists and terrorist networks have increased exponentially. How do we declare that the United States will prevail on the global war on terror? We get rid of the Republicans in Congress, and we get rid of the Republican administration in the White House. Get rid of them politically, of course. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions. We have too many questions to ask, so I apologize in advance to those whose questions we can't get to. Let me ask, first of all, one of the most important questions of all. How do we send checks for Ned Lamont? Ned, how do we do it?
If you like Ross Perot, you go to nedlamont.com, and you can sign up there. It'd be much appreciated. We've had, I think, over 9,000 people have donated. It's small money donations, but it's real donations. It shows we got a lot of grassroots support out there, and anything you can do would be much appreciated. nedlamont.com.
nedlamont.com. Okay. When's the primary?
The primary is on August 8th, and Connecticut's a wonderful place to spend late July and early August, if anybody's around.
Okay, we have a question that come up a couple of times, and we'll ask Ned and the entire panel, how does the threat of Iran affect U.S. policy? What should we be doing, and how should we be talking about Iran in this election?
I talk about Iran, then I'd really like to defer to the ambassador. But in terms of lessons learned, obviously we're bogged down in Iraq. That's destabilized the Middle East, made the situation worse. Ahmadinejad is taking advantage of that. I think there's no question about it. Early on, it was Senator Lieberman and President Bush who kept rattling the saber. Started out with axis of evil. Then it was the military option is on the table. The military option is on the table. And every time they said that, the price of oil went up a couple of bucks and made the situation worse and made Ahmadinejad more of a nationalist hero in his home country. What should we be doing? Maybe we're headed that way now, but we should be working with those that have real economic leverage with Iran. That's not only Western Europe, who we're working with, but also Russia and India, where they want to build a natural gas pipeline. There, I think we can have a constructive, direct dialogue with Iran, no preconditions, and I think with carrots and sticks, we can head off this militaristic talk and bring Iran back into the community of nations. Ambassador?
I think that's exactly right. To a large extent, we've boxed ourselves in with this war on Iraq. We essentially are killing Sunni on behalf of the Shia and their Iranian patrons. Should we decide to do anything militarily with Iran, they will immediately, effectively take 130,000 American soldiers hostage. They will close the Straits of Hormuz. You will see gas and oil prices explode, and we will not win in any forum, whether it be political, diplomatic, or arguably military. The idea of trading 10 years of setting back their nuclear program for a century or more of enmity is, frankly, that's not very good risk management. We should be talking to them across the board.
A questioner asks about the increasing isolationism of the United States, that one of the consequences of the Iraq war is to make people feel as if the United States needs to be more isolated in the world. So the question is, what about, and specifically, what about foreign aid? Should we be reducing foreign aid and reducing our engagement in the world and spending more of our resources here in the United States?
Sure.
Well, I'm a big fan of the One campaign, which my colleague. I mentioned great countries should have great causes. And I think most Americans think we probably spend a third of our federal budget on foreign aid, which is, I think it's less than 1%, actually, much less than 1%. And so what I say is we should only spend 2% of our budget on foreign aid. I think we're a rich country. We should be doing more. We should be building friends, and that means helping poor countries. I mean,
one of the problems with the whole thesis behind the Iraq War and everything else we're doing that was put forward by the Project for the New American Century, which is an ill-advised attempt to convert this country from a republic to an empire. And one of the problems is, of course, these people didn't understand that the United States is not naturally imperial. After all, we really only have one border, that with Mexico. There are those Canadians, perhaps, who might argue that Canada poses another border. It rarely does. And one of the consequences of this is it will, the blowback from our engagement in Iraq will be to even be more isolationist than we have been, than we are naturally. And that is a problem for the conduct of a visionary foreign policy or even a middling foreign policy. My own view of this is that development assistance is way underfunded. We per capita and per income, we are really one of the minor players in this. Because we have so many resources, the global numbers look good, but on a per capita basis, we really are rather miserly.
I'd only add that I think there are certain moral imperatives where our country has got to step up. Be it the tsunami, be it the earthquake. And let's start with Darfur. Maybe that's a place where the United States can get back in front and show that we care. We can work in conjunction with the Arab League. We can work in conjunction with other countries and make a difference. The only other thing I'd add is when it comes to Iraq, yes, I do think it's the end of our major military operations, but we did help break that place up. And I think when it comes to humanitarian assistance, when it comes to reconstruction assistance, the United States will be there.
Well, I'm afraid to say that we have run out of time, and so we're going to have to close this session. First of all, let's thank the panelists for a tremendous presentation. Hey.